almost 100 guys that go to work pulling burglaries in Denver. We were 8 times more likely to be able to bring charges when we had DNA that we got a profile on. And we figured that that $500,000 they gave us, for every dollar we saved the people of Denver in stolen property, in claims to their insurance, and the Denver police in responding to burglaries that were not committed, $25.6 million. So certainly the feds made a good investment when they gave us the $500,000 in Denver. We figured that the return for every dollar was $63, and we freed up every Denver police officer for 150 hours a year to respond to other crimes. So we think it was a success. We were the most successful site. We were the only site that had a prosecutor's office involved, so we could track it all the way through conviction. So the federal study is a little disappointing in that the other sites didn't have the teamwork that we had, but we have our own study that we printed, and you can find it on my website if you're interested in reading about it. One of the things in DNA, I did talk to you about our statute is an all-felon statute in Colorado. Many states are moving to an arrestee statute, where they take DNA on the arrest for a felony offense. There's the list of states that do it, and the federal government just recently passed a statute to allow them to take DNA from all people arrested on a federal felony offense. Why would you take DNA on arrest as opposed to upon conviction? Because it saves lives. It prevents crime. You know, I argued with somebody from the ACLU on the radio a couple months ago, and she said, well, you know, DNA is important to prove a case, but it doesn't solve crime. And I said, it does. It does prevent crime. If you take it from arrestees as opposed to convicted felons. And the reason it does is because it stops those people earlier. So if you have a serial rapist or a serial rapist murderer, you stop them earlier on when they're on committing those crimes. Illinois did a study out of Chicago where they identified 60 individuals. There were 8 individuals they looked at. They were serial offenders. They were responsible for 60 crimes that could have been prevented, and those were 53 murders and rapes. And what they showed was that when they got arrested on their first felony, then when would they have had their match, and how many cases would they have prevented from then on, as opposed to waiting till they were convicted and then how many took place. We did the same study in Denver. We don't have as many serial rapists and murderers as they have in Chicago, thank goodness. We looked at 4 individuals. We were able to determine that we could have prevented 3 murders, 2 by one man and 1 by another man. The Capitol Hill rapist murdered a woman, and we had a serial murderer who was killing prostitutes. We could have prevented 3 murders, and we could have prevented over a dozen sexual assaults if Colorado had an arrestee statute at the time that they were active. The other thing that you may have seen me talk about on 60 Minutes or different places is this familial searching. The idea of using our DNA database in a more efficient fashion. When we get a match, we know it matches with the individual. But I talked about the inherited nature of the DNA that we use. We don't use DNA that we can say, okay, you know, this person's going to have this disease, they're going to get cancer, we can tell how tall they are, we can tell, you know, that's not what we look at. We look at what they consider to be junk DNA to help us identify people. But we don't know anything about the race, we don't know anything about those secrets that DNA holds. We don't look at that area for DNA. But you can determine certain things by looking at if people have things in common. My brothers and I all get our DNA from the same source, our mom and dad. We're going to have a lot of similarities in those areas that we look at. The British are doing familial DNA searching, and they are looking at those kinds of things with their database. They've been successful. They've looked at about 150 major cases. serial murderers, serial rape cases, and they've been able to get investigative leads based on the similarity of somebody that is in their database to a crime scene of somebody who is not in their database through the familial relationship. We started a little research project in Denver to do that work ourselves. We haven't had a lot of luck convincing the FBI to do this work or to research this work, so we figured we'd research it ourselves. If we had some success, maybe we could force this issue along a little bit in the United States. But basically what we're doing is we took a software. It's a software that they use to identify the remains of individuals that were killed in 9/11, that are killed in plane crashes. They connect families and they identify remains. We took that software, we applied it to our little database in Denver to see if we had any relatives to any of our unsolved cases. We found 3 where the software told us there was a 90% chance that we either had siblings or a father-son relationship. We used that YSTR technology then to see, okay, if these guys are really brothers, they should have the same Y chromosome. So we ran that testing. And we confirmed, yeah, the 2 brother situations, they had the same Y chromosome. We went back to the cases and we determined they were brothers. In the one that was the father-son, I have an example. This is the individual that we knew of that was in our database. We had a burglary where we had earwax on a phone earplug that, of course, the victim said that didn't belong here. So we got DNA out of the earwax and it was unsolved. But he told us there was a 90% chance that we had a father-son relationship. We went back and we looked at the individual. We did the YSTR testing and they had the same Y chromosome type. We looked at this particular individual. He is somebody that's very familiar to us in Denver. He's doing a 96-year sentence for attempting to kill a woman, but you can see he had a lengthy criminal history both here and in Adams County. So we figured, okay, we'll do a family tree to see if he has any sons that might have committed our burglary. We took the women out because they don't have Y chromosomes, and we left us with 3 sons. 2 of his sons were in the penitentiary at the time of our burglary. Pretty hard to pull a burglary when you're locked down in Canyon City. So we knew they didn't commit the offense. That left the 3rd son. He was in the penitentiary at the time we did our investigation. And under that 2007 law, we called the penitentiary and said, have you taken his DNA yet? And they said no. And we said, could you put him at the top of the list? They said yes. And we had a CODIS hit from the DNA database 2 weeks after we made that request. They put his DNA in, it matched our earpiece in our burglary, and we answered whose earwax is on that earpiece through doing this work. We have elicited to continue our identification research, we needed a bigger database. So we have elicited CBI, they have the bigger database, have about 80,000 people in the Colorado DNA database. We have about 2,000 unsolved crimes. We've run the software. We're in the process of doing the YSTR testing. There's about 60, we think, unsolved cases where there's potentially people that are related. And we'll run the YSTRs, we'll do a conventional investigation on those that match with the same Y chromosome, and hopefully we'll solve some cases. I'll keep you posted on that. Does anybody have questions? I know I probably went over a little, but anybody have any questions? Thanks. Oh, yes.
How much does it cost for like a typical DNA test?
Well, it depends. A typical DNA test on a reference sample costs about $50. Now, of course, you got to figure in the state employees and all of that, but the actual test costs about $50. It's a little more expensive to do a test from a crime scene because oftentimes they're mixtures. In a rape case, for instance, where we do a rape kit analysis, that's always going to be a mixture of the victim and the suspect if we get a DNA, if we get a sperm sample. So those are more problematic, but a single source sample costs about $50.
That's great. Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you.
If you come on up, I got a couple of things that I'd like to give you. We have this Branch Rickey baseball from our Branch Rickey event this year with John Schmaltz, and I'm going to just wipe all of my fingerprints off of this here before I give it.